What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the shop. My name's Taylor, for those that are new. Today, unfortunately, we're not going to be working on anything super fun. It's kind of a boring day for me. I've been dreading this and putting this off for what seems like a few months, but my wife informed me that it's probably been closer to 2 years. So the lesson here for all of y'all watching is, if you know you need to do something, you should prioritize doing it. Don't be a procrastinator. Don't be lazy. Don't say, oh, I'll get to it next week or the following week, because it snowballs out of control. And I think we all know that. We all go through that in our own lives in some way or another. But it gets carried away, and then you end up in the situation that I'm currently in. So we got the XJ back on the lift. It needs a clutch. Clutch is completely gone. Well, almost completely gone. But I'm pretty sure the transmission also needs synchronizers. This thing's got like 300,000 miles on it. 330, I believe. It does look like somebody's been into the transmission before, so I don't think they're original. But nonetheless, I do think the trans needs a full rebuild. At least synchronizers. Like, all the gears work, but man, it's a struggle to get them into gear sometimes. And I've just been putting it off. Every time I drive it, it doesn't seem to be that bad. But the wife tells me that it's bad, and it's not that I don't fully believe her. It's just when I drive it myself and it feels different, it's like, oh, it's not that bad. It'll keep working, and I'll order the parts and we'll get to it when we get to it. Well, that day is today. It won't go into gear with the clutch. You can start it in gear with the clutch pushed in and it won't move. It's just barely not grabbing. But I haven't ordered the parts. I don't have anything. Clutch kit sitting at O'Reilly's right now. I ordered it yesterday. It's ready to pick up. That's not a problem. The problem is the trans rebuild kit with the synchronizers and the seals and the bearings is like 2 weeks out. So it's gonna sit here for 2 weeks, tore apart, or I'm gonna put a clutch back in it. We're gonna drive it for a couple weeks, and then I'm gonna take it all back apart and do synchronizers, because the wife's got the Duramax. I drove the Scout yesterday and I puked all the power steering fluid out of the steering assist hydraulic cylinder. The pump sounds like it's dying. And we got a bunch of rain coming up this week, and with no roof and no windshield wipers, it's not ideal. So we're kind of down to one vehicle with both of us working jobs. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm still waiting on the transmission to get finished up for the OBS, and we can put that back together. But for now, we're going to get the transmission out of the Jeep. We're going to get the clutch off of it. We're going to kind of inspect everything. I'm going to pull the shifter off the trans, see if I can't see down in there, and take a look at what the synchronizers look like, if I can see them. And then we're just going to come up with a game plan of what to do from there. But this video is pretty much how to change a clutch in a early 90s Jeep Cherokee, I guess. If you want to watch the boringness, and welcome to the show, and hope you enjoy it, hope you learn something. If you don't want to watch it, then it's fine by me. I don't really care. I'm just doing this to do it, and I've got to pull the trans and do the clutch anyway, so might as well fire up the camera and let it run. And if anything, it's a how-to for people that don't know how, whether you want to try it or if you just want to know the basic skills and the basic process of what it takes to pull a manual transmission and change a clutch. Well, here you go. So sit back, enjoy, and watch me get dirty and frustrated and all the things, because I really don't want to do this. This thing leaks oil out of everywhere that holds oil. It's all been resealed 2 or 3 times. It's never actually stopped leaking oil. So it's kind of all covered in oil, and it's not going to be fun. It's going to be a mess. But we're here. I'm going to make the most of it. We're going to get the job done. So let's get after it. All right, apologies if there's some wind noise. I've got the porta-cool running. It's too hot today to be miserable without that. So, first step, we gotta get the drive shafts off. If you're doing a two-wheel drive, well, lucky you just get to do it once. But, lucky for me, because this is four-wheel drive, I get to do it twice. And if you're doing this in like a truck or a car, you'll have a slip yoke up here and that'll just come right out. But this one has a slip yoke eliminator. So we have another set of bolts to take out. Good time to check all your U-joints. Make sure they're not all wobbling around and loose. If this is going to be kind of a long-term project, I highly suggest putting your bolts back in where they go and just saving you some headache. All right, let's do the front. Especially if it's your first time doing it and you're not real sure. You may not remember where they go when you go back to put it together. I've done this stuff enough times that I have a pretty good idea of where things go. All right, the front's a little more difficult, of course. When you got it in the air, you should be able to kind of hold your drive shaft to break these free, but if you can't, you can always put it in gear, or you got another person, somebody can hold the brakes. Never fails. I got a grease and oil on my hands and my face starts itching. This one's always a little tricky to get to. You usually can't get a socket or a ratchet wrench. Now this drive shaft I've completely rebuilt, remade, so these bolts are different than factory. If you were to get I think the factory has more of a like flange bolt, which has a smaller socket head on it. You could probably get in here with a ratchet wrench or a socket at that point. Fortunately for y'all watching, we can skip to the good part here. All right, I think next thing we're going to do is we're going to drop the cross member here, and we're going to take the exhaust off because the exhaust is going to fight us at the bell housing and our clutch. Those two out of the way, we will get all the bolts loose on the transfer case and get all the linkage and wires undone, and then I think we'll put the cross member back in temporarily to hold the trans, and then I can move a jack back. We can get the transfer case off. I could manhandle it and just lift it down, but I'm not really in the mood for that because while it's not very big, it's full of fluid and it gets heavy quick. Sometimes I will take the whole transfer case down at the same time, but that's also kind of a headache because it's hard to get balanced on the jack. So I think for this situation, I'm going to take the transfer case off we're just gonna have to do a little bit of back and forth. But that's okay. I'm gonna take these two out just because they're easy to get to. Out of the transmission mount so that I can get the jack up in there. And then when we take the cross member out, we'll get the other two. Oh, the jack is maxed out. Well, it's like a 1/4 inch from touching it, so when we take the cross member down, it should work. I think those are 13s. Working on anything from the early 90s is kind of annoying because they tend to have a mix of metric and standard size bolts. I actually got 3 different sizes. Perfect. Okay, now we can separate the transfer case. Remember how to take the linkage off. Okay, linkage is out of the way. Now we should be able to take our transfer case nuts off. All right, the exhaust is now on our way. So let's go ahead and pop that off. Hopefully it won't put up too much of a fight. I changed this header out probably a year ago. So that should make it a little bit easier to come off. Now, if you've got a stock exhaust, that won't be that easy. Just gonna go all the way out the back. But if you've got dumped, super easy. Okay, we got two more nuts to take off here. Part of the reason I've been putting this off is I would really like to pull this whole engine and transmission out and either put like a stock 4.8 LS, or I've been kind of wanting to diesel swap it with either like a Volkswagen TDI or maybe a 4BT or a little John Deere 4-cylinder. Just I haven't found exactly what I want for a good price. But my plan, if I did do that, was to basically reuse this transmission and transfer case. So I was just going to do all that together, but I guess not. All right, there's not much room on this passenger side, so in order to get to this other bolt, I gotta put a crow's foot on the bigger ratchet. We're gonna need a long extension. Now, if you take all these nuts out, the transmission is not gonna fall, or the transfer case is not gonna fall. It has, these nuts are on studs, like there's studs in the transfer case going into the transmission flange. And there's also splines that stick into the transmission a couple inches. So like you have to pull it back in order to get it to come out. All right, if you're wondering, that's what a crow's foot looks like. You can get a 90-degree grip and put your ratchet and extension, and then when you get it loose, you can actually use this as a little mini wrench. If you had stubby wrenches, if I had stubby wrenches, you might could get them in there. I have some like medium length wrenches, but they wouldn't fit either, so. Crow's foot for the win. Yeah, I don't really want to manhandle that. It's ready to come out. I got all of our hoses and linkage and wires disconnected. All the nuts are off of it. So I just need to put the cross member back in. Put this in here. So that should allow us to drop this just a little bit. We're gonna have to put the transmission mount back in it. Now we got that holding up the transmission again. We can lower this down. Move it back and put it on the transfer case. Get y'all out the way so you don't run into it. So we should be able to slide this back. Never had, I don't think I've had this one off, but yeah, just like that. They're not too heavy, they're just annoying. A little awkward. We'll get this down to a manageable level and then I can grab it and set it on the ground. Take that back. I think I have had this one off because I think I resealed the transfer case at some point. All right, now we can go back up, grab our transmission, the cross member back out. I'm gonna go ahead and take our lower bell housing bolts, very similar to what we did on the transmission mount because they're gonna get in the way a little bit. These are a little bit annoying because they have nuts on the backside. Oh yeah, we gotta take the starter off because the starter bolts into the bell housing. I guess I should have led with disconnect your battery first, which I've already done. I just didn't tell y'all that I'd already done it. Oh yeah, this is the really weird starter. I got too many different vehicles. It gets confusing to remember what is what. 11mm bolt on the front side at the bottom, but then it has this big, I don't know, 5/8 or something on the back side. Rather confusing to remember everything. We can just let the starter hang, get it out the way. You want to try to get as much out of your way and take off everything you can before you get your transmission jack in, because then it gets just messy. So I'm going to cut all these zip ties holding our wires up, get them out the way, get all our plugs unplugged. Honestly, you can disassemble, you can take every nut and bolt with the exception of like one bell housing bolt at the top. You can take them all out and then get your transmission jack up in there. Because again, especially with a standard and a clutch, your input spline is splined into that clutch a couple inches, so like the whole thing physically has to come backwards. So I always like to just get everything I can, because once this is here and it's in your way and it's just fighting you. We got our crank sensor up there that's kind of in the way. I think we got to disconnect that from the very top. All right, the only thing we got left is the clutch hydraulic hose or line. I don't want to touch just yet because that's going to make a mess. This one doesn't have the newer vehicles have like a dry brake quick connect where once you break it open, it doesn't leak. It's like sealed. But this one is old school. You know what though? We need some more. The other nightmare about a standard transmission and that input shaft with the splines is you got to have everything leveled just right, go in and out. So we either need to bump the lift down or we need to block this up. But if I block it up, then it gets sketchy. So I think we're going to take the lift and go down one click. That's going to mean I'm going to have to bend down a little bit more, but it is what it is, I guess. The less weight and the less stuff in your way, the better off it's going to be. Oh, so I have all the bell housing bolts out. This one doesn't actually have one in the top. Interesting. So all I have to do is disconnect our hydraulic line. We got to take the shifter off because we have to come back before we can go down. So we're going to put a little twist in our motor mounts. And we're going to get us a little bit of room right here so we can pop the 4 bolts off and take that shifter out. And then we'll stuff some rags in there. So we don't get no junk. Now some vehicles, you can take the shifter, the stick part You can take it off right at the top of this, and you don't have to pull this from the transmission. This one's actually set up that way, but I've had this shift housing out, and there's no getting this stick off the actual shifter itself. It's a little wore out and a little mushroomed in there. Oh, you know what? I was wrong. There are two little tiny bolts. One right there and one over there that we got to take out. Those two there with that sensor, that's the crank sensor, they're just bolted into the bell housing. So I'm not going to take the crank sensor off, I'm just going to unplug it. I don't want to tap this too hard, but it just needs a little love tap. Just to break the seal. And we should be able to snake that out. I already took the knob off and the boot. That makes it a lot easier. You definitely want to make sure you take your shift boot off, otherwise you'll never get that out. I mean, you could have it just hanging up in there, or hanging out in there. But that just gets in your way. Stuff a rag, just to kind of keep the dirt out. I know we might end up rebuilding this, but in the case we don't. Okay, now we got to try to get those little bolts out at the top. They look like they're 6-point. I have some 6-point sockets, but I don't think I have that size. 12-point it is. Oh, it's a 10 millimeter and it's loose. Very nice. Sorry guys, there's nowhere to put that light. It doesn't really, the magnet doesn't stick to sheet metal. It's covered in undercoating and dirt. Leave it up to Chrysler and Jeep to do some weird stuff with these little tiny head, somewhat large bolt. Especially when like this is what's in the rest of the bell housing. Rather strange. All right, I need to crawl up top real quick and disconnect that crank sensor. And then we will disconnect the clutch line and out she comes. I'm not sure, I've never owned any other Cherokees besides this one. I'm not real sure what the factory one looks like, but this has an aftermarket steel braided line. Make sure you get a container to put it in. I'm guessing this is just going to empty the master cylinder. I don't have any AN fitting caps that small, so we're just going to zip tie a rag over it so that we keep the dirt and the dust out. And if it keeps dripping, it'll just soak the rag for a while. Then we can shove it up out of the way. All right, so I think we're ready to pull this sucker. First thing though is I want to get a strap. Around the transmission. Just, you don't have to do this, but I would recommend, because the last thing you want to do is drop this sucker or it roll. But also sometimes too, you need a little bit of wiggle room. I was saying sometimes you need a little wiggle room to kind of re-angle or reposition the transmission. All right, so we're gonna go up a little bit We also probably need to block up the engine because it's going to want to come down. And they'll fight each other. So I'm going to put a block on the axle. It's not super ideal because it's going to put the weight of the engine kind of on the springs and shocks, but it will work. If you're doing this in your garage or like on your driveway, concrete floor, whatever, you would just put a jack right there. Going out's the easy part. It's always the going in that sucks. All right, let's get our clutch off, and then we will we'll see what we're working with in terms of transmission and everything else. She definitely smells a little bit burnt. Not a lot burnt, but let's see if the little baby Milwaukee will take it off. Nice. I like to loosen these a little bit because that pressure plate is under pressure. It's spring loaded. Get the watch for your clutch disc. Flywheel is honestly not too bad. Not too bad at all. It's got some heat spots in it. Got a slight little lip there, but it's nothing terrible. It's always best to have these either resurfaced or buy a new one. They're honestly not that expensive, and like resurfacing, you got to take it somewhere and drop it off. I think a new one for this is like $98, but it's best practice to take new clutch, new or resurfaced flywheel, just so you get a nice smooth, even surface. Now, let's see what we got over here. Pretty good oil leak in here from the engine. The throwout bearing's not too bad. I do believe this slave was leaking a little bit. When she brought it home the other day and it was not working at all, the fluid was pretty low. I topped it off and I got it to just have a little bit of clutch, but not much. So we're definitely going to replace all that. The disc itself, it's not absolutely fried. It didn't make it metal to metal yet, but there's really nothing left. These grooves are almost completely wore flush. It smells a little toasty. It's got some hot spots, a little melted there. I don't think this is a factory clutch. It's a Luck, L-U-K, Luck, Luke, I don't know. So, we got a new clutch at O'Reilly's we gotta go pick up. We got a new slave cylinder to pick up. The kit should come with a pilot bearing. But honestly, I thought these would have had a pilot bushing. These are a pain in the ass to get out. Excuse my language, but they are a pain in the ass to get out. There's a few tricks. They make some special tools and some pullers. You can actually, crazy as this is, you can look it up on YouTube. There's hundreds of videos. But you can take a loaf of bread and pack bread in there with a punch and hammer on it, and it will hydraulically push that bearing out. Typically these are like bronze bushings, but this is an actual roller bearing, and the grease is still kind of grease. So I've had luck in the past with, we can brake clean that and get the grease out and then just repack it with grease right here, and we'll be pretty solid. So probably gonna go that route. If you're looking at this telling me you need to change your rear main seal while you're there, I've done it twice. Literally twice. And it still keeps leaking. A lot of it, it's leaking from the valve covers too. It's leaking from the oil pan gasket. Like, all of that has been done twice. It's very frustrating. It's very annoying. Some of these bolts have even been like drilled and tapped bigger because some of them were stripped out. So I don't want no comments about my oil leak, because I know it's terrible. We're working on transmission today. We're also going to pressure wash this sucker. These are not too difficult. If you're going to do this in like a Dodge Cummins NV 4500, 5600, they suck. Those are cast iron. They're freaking heavy. See what we can see in here in terms of the synchronizers. Fluid's okay looking. I know y'all really can't see nothing. I can see a little bit, but there ain't room for both those. I mean, those synchronizers right there do not look wore out. I'm not sure if that's 5th gear. Again, y'all can't, there's not enough room for the camera down in there. But that does not look bad. So, I think we're gonna go get a clutch, go pick it up, and then we're gonna try to put all this back together. And it's pretty much at this point a 50-50 shot whether the clutch is the whole problem. It has been like riding towards the bottom of the floor for quite some time. Like, it should release and start moving the Jeep forward a little further up towards the top of the pedal. And it's been fairly shallow, so I'm just gonna go with it needs a clutch. And we're gonna try that. And I guess worst case, if it's still acting up, then I order the rebuild kit and we get to do this all over again. So we'll go get our parts. I'll come back and probably put the shifter back in, and I'll pressure wash all this, get it nice and clean. Sure is, it's cracked. Bell housing's cracked. Great. Yep, look at that. Holy crap. I'm guessing that's got something to do with these two were loose, maybe? I don't know, we might need to try to weld that. That could honestly be some of our clutch problems too, because if it is, think about it, you got basically 2 bolts here. Take these out of the equation because they're useless. I guess you have, no, look, that's not a bolt. I think that might be dowel pins. So you got 2 bolts. One is just above the center line, the other 2 are below the center line. So there's nothing up here. So when you push the clutch in, there's a extreme amount of pressure getting pushed by this hydraulically, and then you have the extreme pressure of the pressure plate that you're forcing against. All of that is going to basically put a lot of load on these two bolts, and it's going to want to do this at the top of that bell housing. I guarantee you that when you step on the clutch, this gap gets slightly bigger. Not a lot, but I'm willing to bet it gets a little bit bigger. So that is fighting against. The more that moves, the less actual movement of your clutch disc or your pressure plate, which means the less effective clutch you have. So that might be quite a bit of the reasoning there. I mean, all of this feels pretty good for what it is. Probably gonna get some fluid and we'll do a fluid change on this thing. It ain't terrible looking, but. So that's the plan. I guess I'm gonna run to town. All I got is the Scout and see if she's leaking today. Yeah, it didn't leak anything. I drove it to work yesterday and I parked it inside the shop because it was pouring down rain, and there was a big puddle under here when I went to leave and I couldn't figure it out, and I had no steering. Pump was whining and it was literally just like pouring out of here. You can see so I might need to get a rebuild kit for that PSC cylinder or just buy another one. Honestly, can't be mad though. That thing is, I'm pretty sure, like 17 or 18 years old. It's turning out to be a pretty nice day though. There was a good chance of rain, so I was kind of worried I wasn't going to be able to go get parts. I mean, the Scout's all waterproof and it does fine in the rain. It's just there's no windshield wipers. And you get soaking wet, which is miserable. But I guess I'm gonna run to town, get my parts. We'll come back and work on this some more. I really need to pour concrete out there because that's always a mess. But we got everything pretty much washed. I didn't wash the transfer case. It's dirty, but it was not near as bad as transmission and the cross member. I guess we'll let that kind of dry. We need to try to weld this bell housing. But for now, let's go ahead and get our flywheel and our clutch and all that stuff put in. Those did not seem that tight, and they do not have any Loctite on them. All right, y'all might need to move back just a little bit. Yep, she's still just a puking out of that rear main. All right, we got our new, made who knows where, but engineered in the USA. So there's no dowel pins on this. Doesn't need dowel pins when the bolt pattern is slightly different. We'll just rotate it until we find a good spot. I'm going to start one bolt just to hold it. All right, it looks like 105 foot-pounds. We're going to put a little red Loctite on these bolts. It's best practice to replace your bolts. We're not going to do it this time. These look good. Run those in by hand. We'll take out our first one that we put in. Put our Loctite. All right, this is probably going to be difficult to torque because the engine's probably going to try to spin. All right, I put a breaker bar on the crank and wedged it up against the core support. Now we just got to worry about it falling out. Okay, we're gonna put a little grease in here. Spin the bearing around and work it in. Now we're gonna spray some brake clean on our flywheel surface. They put like a rust coating on here, just like they do on brake rotors and brake drums. You want to wipe that off. All right, on your clutch kit, most of them come with a little alignment tool. You want to make sure it fits in there. And we got our clutch disc. Should be labeled flywheel side. You can see, you know, we should measure. Let's measure what the difference between this one and the old one is. So the old disc measured about 295 thousandths thick. Just a little over 1/4 inch. This new one is about 355, 360, so we're 60 to 65 thousandths bigger. So that's about how much the old one wore down. Again, you want to make sure your flywheel side is towards the flywheel side. We're going to use our alignment pin and we're going to align that. So you can see you get just a little bit of wiggle room. These alignment pins are not perfect, so we're going to put our pressure plate on here. You're going to want to hold this kind of centered and in. We're going to lightly snug our pressure plate, and then we're just going to check this and make sure this moves freely. Because what happens is if you end up at a little bit of an angle, this will feel like it comes out freely. Then when you go to stab the transmission, the input shafts on that transmission is perfect. Like, there's no wiggle in it. So now you've got to hit the splines and you've got to hit that bearing just perfectly right. And it'll fight you for hours. Remember, this won't fit snug right here because we got to suck the spring down. So we're going to do just like we did on the flywheel. We're going to start a bolt and get at the rest of our bolts. And we're going to put just a little bit of Loctite on these, not much. If you end up getting too much, you can take another bolt and kind of swap some out and share. Now this clutch is from O'Reilly's. It's the Power Torque brand. Nothing special, factory replacement. If you look up clutches, there's lots of different options. A lot of it's preference. If you're trying to build performance stuff, put down a lot of power, you're definitely going to want to spend some money and get a better, higher quality brand. But for stock type stuff like this, I've had really good luck with the Power Torque clutches. There's actually a Power Torque clutch in the Scout that is the exact same clutch. I have taken it apart. I've checked it out a couple times, but it's the same clutch that was in there when I originally built the truck about 16 or 17 years ago. I think that's the 4th, maybe 5th engine, and it's all the same clutch. And it's putting about 400 to the tires, so they're pretty strong. All right, we're gonna hold this kind of center. We're gonna run these in. If we did it right, this should go all the way in there pretty smoothly. You start it into the splines of the disc, you put a little bit of pressure, it should go right in that bearing. If it feels like it hits the bearing and you have to put excess force, then you want to pull it back apart and try to recenter. Now, you're not supposed to use an impact on those. You're supposed to torque them just like you torque the other flywheel. But if you know your impact, you trust your impact, you'll be fine. But I don't recommend using the impact. So it's one of those situations, do as I say, not as I do. All right, I guess we're ready for the transmission. But I want to try to weld that bell housing, so we'll get it out here and get it cleaned up and See if we can't get it welded. All right, so here's what we got to do. You see our crack? It's all the way over here and over there. Actually, it's like it comes down into here. I'm not going to attempt to weld all of this. I think that's probably just asking for trouble. But I do want to try to weld from here to here in this section. All right, we need to grind it out so we can get a good weld in there. It's aluminum. We don't want to use any abrasives, so we're going to use one of these specialty aluminum ball nose carbide bits. We're going to drill a small hole on both ends of our crack where we're going to stop welding, so that hopefully that should put a relief so that as we're welding it's not just trying to crack more. Typically I wouldn't do that if we're not welding like the entire crack, but I think for this one we will. All right, y'all want to come along? You can watch my terrible aluminum welding skills. It's not even that I'm terrible, it's that my machine just does not like aluminum. You're gonna have to deal with the strobe lights though. If you don't want to watch it, well, then you can go do something else, I guess. Oh, I broke my tripod. Well, win some, you lose some. All right, this stuff's a little thick. My machine doesn't do thick, so we're gonna do a little preheat. All right, let's see what kind of junk it pulls into the weld puddle, because it's been soaked in oil for years. Junk, it's absolute junk. I don't know why the other lights are flickering. Might be pulling too many amps on the old generator. Too much juice to do this thick aluminum. Well, that ain't perfect, but it'll work. I'm not gonna test my luck down in there because with this little boss for the hole, it just ends up getting thicker and this machine physically will not do it. The little 180 is rated to like 1/8 inch aluminum, I think. So we'll let that cool down. We'll get back over there and start stabbing it back in. On another note, I broke my tripod. It's cracked right there. Which kind of sucks because this old sucker, they don't make them like that anymore. It's probably as old as I am, probably early 90s. It's real nice, kind of sad. I was gonna try to finish this today, but O'Reilly's didn't have enough of the transmission fluid that I wanted, so I guess we're just gonna do what we can, probably get it stabbed back in there, and I get some fluid tomorrow. This one has one of those dry brake couplers like I was talking about, so I guess the factory one had it at some point, but somebody swapped over to the steel braided. Well, finally decided to rain, I guess. We're gonna get this new slave cylinder put in. I was gonna try to finish this today, but O'Reilly's didn't have enough of the transmission fluid that I wanted, so I guess we're just gonna do what we can, probably get it stabbed back in there, and I get some fluid tomorrow. This one has one of those dry brake couplers like I was talking about, so I guess the factory one had it at some point, but somebody swapped over to the steel braided. One thing I'm not sure about is these little tabs here. I'm not sure. I do know this is like pre-bled because that's part of that dry brake thing, and then you just bleed it a little bit, but this has these little tabs that are holding it back. I'm not real sure, am I supposed to break those? Never seen one like that. Got a little mounting tab at the bottom, and you put this little lock ring on it. I remember back in the day doing this, the clutch kits never came with slave cylinders. I guess they've gotten smart, because I know in my early days of doing stuff like this, I used to just change the clutch, and 2 months later the slave cylinder would blow out. And then you're just kind of stuck. I think all of these parts are to replace on the factory quick connect. Won't be needing any of that. I'm gonna leave that fitting on there for now. We'll take it off when we get it stabbed back in. I need to pop the shifter off. One thing I highly suggest is put the transmission in a gear so that you can turn your output shaft and kind of line the splines up. You can put the shifter back in it, but you can also just reach down in the hole and push your shifter back. You're gonna put a little tiny bit of grease on the end of this input shaft. This is the tricky part. You got to get the angle of the engine, the crankshaft center line, and the angle of the transmission all kind of even. Plus your height You don't necessarily have to be like square left and right in terms of like the rotation. You got to be at the right angle left and right, but so now it's dropped in the splines, but we've got to get it to go into our pilot bearing. Now this is where the strap tends to fight you, because sometimes you need to kind of roll it. We got to get it on the dowel pins. And that might be the smoothest manual transmission install or install into the spline that I have ever seen. You also want to make sure that you are in fact seated all the way up against there, because if you use the impact or even just the ratchet by hand, you're going to break that bell housing. Does anybody else get annoyed by the sound of rain when you're trying to work on something? I don't hate the sound of rain. Like, it can be very relaxing, but man, I'm trying to work and concentrate. I don't know, I kind of don't like it. I need to find a better socket for those, because 12 point doesn't fit very well. I guess we can put the, I would rather fill the fluid from the shifter hole. It's just a whole lot easier. But in order to do that, we're gonna have to be able to get drop the transmission down a little bit to get it in and out. So I think I'll just leave the rag in there. I'm gonna get the transfer case bolted up. And all we got to do is just kind of drop it down with the cross member, and we can put our shifter back in when that time comes. All right, I've decided to just manhandle this. It's not so bad going in because you get a feel for the weight of it when you pick it up off the floor. But it gets real sketchy when you have an idea in your head of what the weight is, and then you're committed, you get it off, and it's like, oh crap, this is way heavier than I was expecting. And that's when it gets a little sketchy. Take some pressure off the jack for the night, and I'll see y'all, for me tomorrow, for y'all in a few seconds. You know how the drill works. Later. This is Redline MT90. It's a little bit pricey, but I like the way it. Been using it for years in the manual transmissions. It's a little bit thinner than the 90 weight gear oil that they say you're supposed to run. I've been pretty happy with the way it shifts. Supposed to take 3.5 quarts. The proper procedure for this is there's a fill plug on the side of the transmission, and you're supposed to fill it through that, and then when it starts coming out of the plug you have enough fluid. The problem is, and I'll show you in a minute when we go back down there, is it's hard to get to. Without some kind of pump, this is almost impossible to put these bottles. So I just like to fill from the top. Now what you can do, if you got 2 people, you can fill from the top. Somebody can be down there with the plug open, and when it starts coming out, you can put the plug in and you're good to go. But I've learned that a little bit extra doesn't really hurt. You don't want to go crazy, but like 1/4 of a quart, it's not that big a deal. All right, that should be enough. We're gonna put our rag back down in there, and then we can go down underneath, put a shifter in and button all that up. All right, this video is already getting kind of long, so I won't bore y'all with the rest of the details. I'm gonna drop it down. We're gonna put the shifter in. The shifter is technically supposed to have a gasket. We're just gonna seal it with some RTV, some silicone. We're gonna put the shifter in, we're gonna raise it back up, put our 4 bolts here, our 4 bolts in the cross member. I want to throw the drive shafts back in it, exactly like you do when you take them apart. We're gonna put the clutch line and the O2 sensor and crank sensor back in, and then we'll get the bleeding, and I'll bring y'all back to show you a couple tricks and tips for that one. So see you in a few. All right, my camera battery died, and I didn't realize that I had the other 2 on the charger, but they were not actually plugged into the wall. So I went ahead and got it bled, I think. I've yet to try it. I use my little vacuum bleeder because I'm here by myself. I will say that I've had luck in the past with some of these internal slaves. You can fill them up. You can crack your bleeder open and run a hose into a fresh bottle. And you can actually like come back tomorrow, wait overnight or a day or so, and it will actually kind of bleed itself through. And then you might just have to do one kind of bleed cycle with you and somebody else, or a vacuum tool, because sometimes these things, when you put a master cylinder either new or the slave that's new, like they can be a complete pain to get them bled or get fluid down to them. But if you just crack that open and walk away, let it sit for a day or so, it will gravity bleed some fluid through it, so that all you have to do is bleed the air out. You're not trying to bleed all of the fluid down there to that little bitty line. Can't guarantee it works on everything, but I have had luck with it in the past. We'll try to start it in gear with the clutch in. She needs some more. All right, it's another day for me. Update on the Jeep. We got the transmission back in it. I think y'all seen that. I told you I was gonna kind of share some secrets on bleeding the clutch. I kind of ran out of time, and then I come back in here the next day and I was gonna try to finish it, but all my camera batteries were dead and I didn't charge them. I tried to bleed this with my little vacuum bleeder. I got it okay, but I didn't get it great. I ended up having to call the wife out here to help me pump the pedal. We spent probably 30-45 minutes and about a whole large can of brake fluid trying to get all the air out of it. We finally got the air out of it. We did take it for a drive, and it seemed like it was shifting very rough. Like the synchros were still causing problems. It seemed like we fixed the clutch. The clutch was definitely better. It releases higher up in the pedal like it's supposed to, but the synchros were definitely acting up. So I let it sit overnight. I ended up having to drive it to work, so the wife could take my truck so she could go to work. She was off for a couple days. And magically, when I got in it the next morning, cruising to work, the transmission was shifting like flawlessly. Almost brand new. Like, I ended up driving it for about an hour on the way home, just driving around, trying to get it to heat up and see if it would do something. Transmission is still shifting great. Clutch is working great. All that's back to normal. I brought it back in here today because apparently I put the shift linkage on wrong and it was stuck in 4 high. Like, I drove it around all day in 4 high. I didn't realize that until I went to turn really sharply and the front tires started chirping, which is a pretty good indication that you're in 4-wheel drive and the axle joints start binding up. So I got that fixed. I just had the bracket kind of clocked wrong. But it's driving weird. Like, the front end is all over the place. About a month ago I replaced all the bushings, completely rebuilt all the steering arms, new Heim joints, everything. Fresh alignment. It was driving good. I drove it to work. Was driving very sketchy, very scary. Like, steering wheel straight, not much steering wheel input, but it was literally just like fishing across the road, like swerming across the road line to line, and I would have to correct it. Told the wife this is sketchy, I'm gonna take it to the alignment shop. She's like, it's always kind of drove a little rough, it's a Jeep. It's got some road walk and that kind of thing, which is kind of typical for a Jeep. So I let her drive it today, and she called me saying it's all over the road. So since I had it in here on the lift, I decided to check it all out. Everything looks fine, nothing loose, nothing's falling off, nothing looks like it's moved. I did verify we're in 2-wheel drive. I got the shifter back on it. We had like 40 pounds of air in the rear tires. I usually run about 25, 27. I just got new tires put on it right before I drove it to work on the rear. So I don't see how that could cause anything, but I dropped them back down to 26. So we're gonna get it off the lift and drive it up the road and see what happens. And that's pretty much gonna be it. My apologies for my whole camera mishap and not filming the clutch bleeding. You probably didn't want to see that anyways. I get real frustrated when it comes to bleeding brakes and bleeding clutches, especially clutches, because they always fight me. I have been known to fight slave cylinders for days trying to get them bled. I will say this one, I'm not gonna say it's the best one, but could have gone a lot worse, so I'm happy that we got it done there. And it does work, but we got to figure out what's going on in the front end because it is terrible. So let's go for a drive and we're going to see if it's still doing whatever it's doing. I feel like it might be better. It doesn't make any sense, but wide open to the floor. It's probably the slowest vehicle I've ever driven. I used to have a Volkswagen Bug that had a stock 1600 engine in it. Probably like 60 horsepower, and it was faster than this. But the air conditioning's cold, that's always a plus. that's going to be it for this episode. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back at the shop next time.